Hey y'all, it's Sarah, and today I wanted to play with some vinyl. So I've had a lot of questions about issues coming up with applying vinyl to the faux wood painted foam core, and I kind of wanted to go through a few little tips and tricks that a lot of vinyl users may already use. I don't know, I'm not real big into vinyl. I only started with vinyl just because of discovering this little method and wanting to make signs out of it. So most of my experience is using it on the painted foam core. And I wanted to give a few tips and tricks that I personally use that I've had success with, and so far I've not had a lot of peeling. Some of the issues that I've seen come up and been asked about has been getting it applied, having it stay, because the surface that the foam core has once the wax is dry almost makes it not feel like it wants to stick permanently. So I just kind of wanted to go through a few things. I've already gone through and started my sign. I've gotten my image cut out. I'm not sure if you can see that. I know there's a glare. It just says Home Sweet Home. And before I get started on doing the vinyl, I kind of wanted to show something real quick. I have been asked about finishing out full pieces, and I've gone over this before, but I wanted to hit on it again. So part of the reason why I suggest doing black foam core is that you have a nice finished back. You don't have to really do a whole lot to it. You just have a solid black surface, and to me that gives a nice finished look. But I've been asked about the sides, and so I went ahead and did most of the sides here, but I wanted to show what it ends up looking like. And the way that I handle that is I'm just going to bring in my Waverly Wax Paint and Antique, and I'm just going to hit these sides with that. But before I do, if you notice, I have some glue strung across here and a little bit of glue seepage, and sometimes the wax won't take to that glue, so I'm just going to hit it real quickly with just a Dollar Tree sanding block. You can use whatever sander you want, sandpaper, a sanding block, whatever's convenient, and just go through and rub that down those sides and break loose any of your glue strings, any blobs of glue, anything that might seep out, and then just go in. Oops, wrong sponge. I'm going to use, this is just a kitchen sponge that I've cut down into smaller pieces, and while I like these sponges to do my faux finish design, I've realized that these little kitchen sponges don't shred up on these sides like my nicer sea sponge does. So to save the life on my sea sponge a little bit, I've just kind of started using these cheaper ones, and I'm just going to lay this flat so I'm not getting too much of this on the back. And so anything extra that you have, just be sure to wipe it off. Check that on the front and the back to make sure that you haven't gotten a whole lot either direction. And I just kind of wanted to review that. I know some of you have seen that already on finishing a piece, but I did want to show that one more time so that you have a nice finished out edge. So let's go ahead and get started on doing this part, and I'm going to make sure that I don't have any paint on my hands that's going to affect how my vinyl sticks. And to cut out my image, all I did was use Home Sweet Home, and I believe that this is just the plain Arial font. I went through and found the first cursive font that I could find for this center section, and that's basically all I did. I didn't get too fancy with it. I wanted it to be short and sweet. Pun intended. So I've cut a fresh sheet of transfer paper. I didn't have any transfer paper that I've used before that was going to fit this size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my transfer paper off of here. And for those of you that are regular vinyl users, don't cringe at how I do the vinyl. It works for this particular product when it comes to the painted foam core. You guys may have other methods that you use for other things. The foam core is the only thing that I really play with vinyl for. So So I've got that off, and this is a brand new sheet, which means it's really, really sticky. So one of the problems that has come up with applying it is people are having their paint lift back off. So to address that part, there's going to be two methods, and oops, I got paint on there. There's going to be two methods. One, I am sticking this to my shirt. I just have on a cotton t-shirt. I am sticking this to my shirt to lessen some of that super stickiness that we've got going on. Now, the one thing about doing vinyl on this material is for it to work, there is a little more effort to it, but it will work. So I've gotten it on there. I don't know if you guys can see. It's got a lot of the little particles from my t-shirt on there, but it's still going to stick. So for now, I'm going to use the plastic harder Cricut tools just to get my letters to stick to that transfer paper really well, because it's been stuck to my shirt and it's a little less sticky. It's definitely going to need a little more work to stick to that transfer paper. But it's better to take a little more work doing this part than it is to try to correct a paint problem when it's lifted your paint back off. And this applies to, I've done this on a couple other materials that were non-porous surfaces. Even though the paper is a porous surface, the paint will lift off of it. The wax paint will. I've done some of the metal type materials, like the pizza pans and stuff, where the paint is really likely to lift off. You can pull it off if you're very careful and have this work. So I feel like I've gotten all of those fairly decent. And this is pretty much the only way that I'm going to be using an actual Cricut tool or similar type tool, because we do not want to use these against the foam core. You know that when we're making the faux wood design, we're able to carve into it, damage it to get the distressing. Using this hard plastic tool can sometimes lead to the very same thing, and you definitely don't want that after you've already painted. So let's see if I've got this. I have a better luck flipping mine upside down. And I'm going to try to sit where I can see a little better. So I like to peel mine off this way. I am literally pulling my paper against that thing. The little spatula thing. And this is going to come off really easy, which does scare me a little bit. I might have not gotten it de-sticky enough. But our next step, well, before I do all that, let me show you what I'm going to do next. This is the part that really kind of stinks as far as using this material with this material. Because instead of relying on your transfer paper to help line things up, we need to get rid of as much of that as we can. And I'm just going to do it as quickly as I can. And ordinarily, I would cut every single one of these words independent and lay them that way so that that's less transfer paper for me to have to worry about sticking to my paint and pulling it off. Although I still wanted to show that you can do it this way. You just have to take a little extra caution and care. So we are essentially getting rid of as much of this surrounding stickiness as we possibly can. You have to be pretty decent at being able to eyeball laying out your images. The more you de-stick your transfer paper, it's easier to use the full sheet and stick it down. But I usually try to err to the side of caution on this. Okay, so I know that these are all stuck already. Let me go through and pull them back off. You can see I kind of got a weird shape going on here, so it definitely affects how I'm going to align it. However, one of the things that does help is the fact that we've cut these boards into pretty decent sized slats, so that does give me a spot for alignment, and that really helps. So I'm going to get this to where I can see really well above it. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball it center. And what I'm going to do is, my center of my board is right here. My center of my entire piece is right here. So I'm just going to line this sweet part up, because I know that that's at least close to center. So I've made sure beforehand, when I laid this out, I laid my boards out so that my knot holes didn't line up to where I wanted to place my lettering. That's me personally. You can manage over it. It's just, I don't feel like it leaves as smooth of a vinyl image. And the same thing when I line these up. I tried to rearrange my boards until I found ones that really flushed up against each other, and that'll help get this laying down. So rather than going and use something like this that could very easily dent your surface, we're just going to use a popsicle stick. And the reason I'm using this is because it's really, really soft wood. You're less likely to gouge into any of this or leave any scratchy marks behind. So I'm just going to go in and do like you typically would do. Except for with this, you really want to hit each and every letter independently, because you can't do it super hard. You can't scrape it across like you normally would with that. So you really kind of want to hit every letter right off. And I'm not doing a whole lot of the transfer. I'm not trying to touch a lot of the transfer paper around it. So it looks like we're doing pretty good. I'm definitely going to hit it really well across this sweet part, because it does go across two separate slats. You'd encounter this the same way if you were using real wood. You'd have to do caution along those slats. I made sure that I got them as flush as I could. And I'm going to do each one of these. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure, because even just a little bit of pressure, you can get definite indentions in this foam core. And especially now that it's been painted, the surface is a lot weaker once it's painted. So I'm going to try real carefully to pull this off. And I have realized that if you come back, pull your transfer paper back on itself really, really flat. And I keep my little popsicle stick right along in case any of those letters want to lift. And right now is not really the hardest problem that I've heard people saying. It's once they've peeled it off and it feels like they're not getting a secure attachment with their vinyl. I know a lot of people suggest that when you're using vinyl and you apply vinyl, use a blow dryer or a heat gun to warm that up and get it to stick. You can do that with this. However, I do want to caution that adding that heat to this, and I've learned this lesson the hard way by trying to speed up my drying process, you can make this foam core warp underneath your project if you put too much heat on it for too long. You have to be really cautious about that. That was one of the other tips that I wanted to give too. So part of the reason that I already pre-made my sign is there is a difference between paint drying and paint curing. And if you've ever waxed a piece of furniture, you'll know that it could be dry within the first day, but it can take a couple weeks before you notice that it doesn't perhaps dent where that sealer has truly cured and sealed off. Same thing happens with this wax paint. When you paint these, the longer you can wait and give your boards time or your faux wood strips time to sit around and let that paint cure on there, the more easily you're going to be able to apply this without that vinyl lifting back off. Okay, so what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm still going to keep with the popsicle stick, and I'm going to lay it almost flat against these. I don't want to push this way because even just the lightest pressure, I'd leave marks on this. So I'm almost bending this thing a little bit with my finger to flatten it out against this board to not risk any indentions now that I'm fully touching the board directly without the transfer paper kind of protecting it some. And for old school scrapbookers, you guys remember fighting with rub ons the same way. You scratch too hard on them, they leave little scratchy marks into the surface of your paper. And since this is a paper surface, you definitely risk that occurring. And it's not just a paper surface, it's the fact that it's a squishy paper surface, for lack of a better way to describe it. Because that foam is underneath it, everything wants to sink down and indent. So I'm using a lot of pressure here when I push down, but I'm using it really flat, so I'm not worried about causing any damage to this surface. So I'm going to go in a little bit with my heat gun, and like I said, very sparingly, because if I keep it on these areas too long, this part right here from about wherever I have it aimed, that foam inside of it heats up and it starts to shrink or expand, and it distorts and warps from the inside out. And your paper will start to take that shape. There ends up being a lot of distortion. So ordinarily, this is an actual heat gun. I think these things get up to several hundred degrees. Definitely a lot hotter than a blow dryer. So I'm using my fingers to do this so that, one, I can feel for myself that I'm not holding it in one spot for too long. If my fingers can't tolerate it, the foam core is not going to be able to either. And you definitely don't want to let it sit too long towards these thinner pieces like your frame, because it will damage those really quickly with it being such a narrow piece. So I've heated those up and they're still almost a little warm to the touch. And I'm just going to go back in again with this popsicle stick. And I'm going to make sure that everything is smoothed down really, really nicely. I feel like it's almost a little bit overkill, but I've already seen others post where theirs has started to feel like it was lifting back up. And this is just regular Cricut white vinyl from Hobby Lobby. There's nothing special to this particular one. So I feel like I've done pretty good. And I want to show you that if I sit here and try to pick at these letters now, even with my nails, I'm not able to pick at them anymore like I would have been had I just laid it, smoothed it out, and been done. So those are a few of the little tricks that I have learned. Hoping I didn't forget any of them to mention to you. I've used this way successfully multiple times and had it stay just fine for me. The biggest thing I think is, one, let your boards dry really, really nicely. And use good pressure, but you're not wanting to use pressure with something like this. It's just too risky in denting in. And I feel like you're able to get a lot more pressure with this soft wood and just keep going back and forth on that to really get a good adhesion point. And you can almost hear it's flat and smooth enough on there that you can't even hear when the popsicle stick hits those letters anymore. So I hope that helps you guys that were asking me questions on how to get this to work a little better without a lot of the lifting and peeling. Keep in mind, your material is a lot different. Even though it looks a lot like wood, it's definitely a lot different. When you go to kind of rub those onto there. And hopefully you won't have any trouble. I know some of you have already had trouble. Try these things. Give your boards, really, to me, I think that's one of the biggest ones. Give your boards a good amount of time to dry so that they're almost sealed into themselves with that wax paint mixture. And I think you may find that you're having less trouble with the feeling like it's sticking. Definitely, even if it feels like a little overboard, use your popsicle stick, go over it multiple times, get that good adhesion point, and only a little bit of heat for those of you that do warm up your vinyl to kind of activate the glue on the back of the vinyl a little more. Feel free to use that. Just keep your hands there. If it's too hot for your hands, it's going to be too risky for your foam core. And I hate to see you get this far into a project and all of a sudden that start to bubble up from underneath. I hope you enjoyed this. I absolutely love this little sign for what it is. I think it's completely adorable. Mine is at a 20 by 20, I believe, is what this is cut out to be. So it's a good little size, and it was 6 wooden strips and at the 3 inches, and then a couple little strips for the sides. And I think this is absolutely adorable. You could honestly put anything you want. Be sure to keep an eye out. I'm gonna put another video out for an alternative similar to this where you can get similar results using the wood foam core look. However, it's done a slightly different way, and it's something that can be done for people that want to do this but don't necessarily have a cutting machine, or if you do have a cutting machine but you don't want to use your vinyl up for this, it'll be a good alternative. I'll try to get that one out next. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I am going to find somewhere cute to put this. So have a great day, and I will talk with you guys soon. Bye.